The fishing nets had been mended and folded, the dock swept clean, and the table set with white linen when Rowan Reed heard the commotion from the main house and knew something had gone terribly wrong. He set down the basket of lake trout he had been carrying and turned toward the estate, his boots squelching in the soft mud at the water's edge. The sun hung low over the lake, turning the surface to beaten copper, and the evening air smelled of pine resin and wood smoke from the kitchen fires. The wedding feast was meant to begin within the hour. His brother Garrett had been pacing the great hall all morning, tight-lipped and pale, while their mother Vivienne orchestrated the servants with the precision of a general marshalling troops. Rowan had stayed clear of it all, as he always did. The estate politics were Garrett's inheritance and Garrett's burden. Rowan had the fishery, the dock, the quiet work of reading weather and water. He was content with that division. But now he saw three figures emerging from the servants' entrance at the back of the manor. His mother, his uncle Simon, and between them a woman in a green dress that looked hastily thrown on, her belongings clutched in a canvas sack. Even from a distance, Rowan could see the set of her shoulders, rigid and too straight, and the particular tilt of her head that spoke of someone holding on to dignity by sheer force of will. The Orc bride, Renna Duskwater, the woman Garrett was meant to marry in an hour's time. Rowan dropped the basket and moved up the slope toward them, his stride lengthening. As he drew closer, he saw her face clearly for the first time. Green skin the color of new leaves in spring, small tusks jutting from her lower jaw, and dark eyes that burned with suppressed fury. She was not tall, perhaps only reaching his shoulder, with a slender build and black hair braided tightly against her skull. The dress hung awkwardly on her frame, too large in the shoulders and too short at the hem, as though it had been borrowed in haste. "What is happening?" Rowan's voice cut through the murmur of his mother's instructions to Simon. Vivienne Reed turned sharply, her expression smoothing into something pleasant and false. "Rowan, this does not concern you. Return to your nets. She is wearing a traveling dress and carrying her things. The wedding is in an hour." He looked at Renna, then back to his mother. "What is happening?" Simon cleared his throat, a blustering sound meant to fill space. "A change of plans, nephew. The arrangement has been reconsidered. Garrett will not be marrying the Orc woman after all. We are simply helping her to a cart that will take her back to the border, all very civilized." Renna's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her knuckles were white where they gripped the canvas sack. "Reconsidered," Rowan repeated slowly. He looked at his mother. "The contract was signed 3 months ago. The bride price was paid. The agreements were witnessed by the magistrate. Contracts can be renegotiated." Vivienne's tone was clipped. "Garrett has decided he does not wish to proceed. That is his right." An hour before the feast. Rowan stepped closer, blocking the path to the stable yard. With guests already arriving, where is Garrett? Inside, preparing an apology to the guests for the bride's sudden illness. His mother's eyes were cold. "Step aside, Rowan. Does she agree to this?" He looked directly at Renna. "Do you wish to leave?" For a moment she said nothing, and he saw the war in her expression. Pride against humiliation, anger against weariness. When she spoke, her voice was low and rough. "I was told I was not wanted, that it was a mistake. That I should go quietly before the feast begins, so as not to embarrass anyone." Embarrass anyone. The words tasted bitter on Rowan's tongue. He turned back to his mother. "You mean embarrass Garrett, embarrass the family, never mind embarrassing her. This is not your concern." Vivienne's voice dropped to a hiss. "Garrett is the heir. Garrett will choose his own bride. This was a political arrangement that no longer serves our interests. The Orc clans have proven less influential than we expected, and there is no advantage in the match. We are within our rights to dissolve it. You are not within your rights to discard her like refuse and sneak her out the back door. Rowan's hands clenched at his sides. If the contract is broken, it is broken in front of witnesses, with compensation paid according to law. You do not bundle her into a cart like a shameful secret. Simon made a grab for Rowan's arm. Boy, you will not speak to your mother this way. Rowan shook him off, his gaze still locked on Vivienne. Where is father? In the village, settling a boundary dispute. He will not return until after dark. His mother's lips thinned. Rowan, you are making this far more difficult than it needs to be. The girl will be given coin for her trouble. She will go home. It will be as though this never happened. Except it did happen. He looked at Renna again, seeing the tightness around her eyes, the way she held herself as though braced for a blow. You traveled here in good faith. You prepared to marry a man you had never met because your family and mine made an agreement. And now you are being sent away in shame, hidden from the guests, told to disappear so that my family's reputation remains intact. Renna's throat worked. She looked at him with something between suspicion and hope. Why do you care, human? You are his brother. You share his blood. I share his blood, Rowan agreed. I do not share his cowardice. He turned back to his mother and uncle. She stays. Rowan, she stays, he repeated, louder now. If Garrett will not honor the contract, I will. Silence fell like a stone into water. Vivienne stared at him, her face draining of color. Simon's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Renna's eyes widened. You do not know what you are saying, Vivienne said at last, her voice shaking. You are a second son. You have no title, no inheritance beyond the fishery. You cannot simply take your brother's bride. She is not Garrett's bride if he refuses her. Rowan folded his arms across his chest. The contract names the Reed family, not Garrett specifically. If Garrett will not marry her, then I will. The agreement will be honored. That is not how these things work. Then we will make it how they work. He looked at Renna. If you are willing. She stared at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. You would marry me, an orc, to spite your brother, not to spite anyone. He kept his voice even. To honor an agreement that should never have been broken, and because no one deserves to be cast aside like this. You do not know me. No. He allowed himself a faint, wry smile, but we have time to remedy that. Renna's gaze flicked to Vivienne, then to Simon, then back to Rowan. He saw the calculation in her expression, the weighing of options. She was proud, he realized, proud and wounded and furious. But she was not fool enough to reject the only offer she was likely to receive. Very well, she said quietly. I accept. Vivienne made a choked sound. Rowan, you will regret this, possibly. He stepped forward and offered Renna his arm, formal as a courtier. But not today. Come. The feast is about to begin, and you are the bride. You should be at the high table. Renna hesitated only a heartbeat before she tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow. Her fingers were cold through the fabric of his sleeve, and he could feel the fine tremor in them, though her face remained composed. Together they walked back toward the main entrance of the manor, leaving Vivienne and Simon standing by the servants' door, speechless. As they rounded the corner, Renna let out a shaky breath. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said. Probably both. Rowan glanced at her. Are you all right? No, her voice was flat. But I will be. They entered through the great doors, and he led her through the hall toward the dining chamber. Servants scattered out of their path, eyes wide. Rowan could hear the murmur of guests assembling beyond the carved oak doors, the low hum of conversation and the clink of cups. Wait. Renna stopped just outside the doors. What are you going to do? Introduce you to the guests, Rowan said. Seat you at the high table. Serve you the first dish, as tradition requires. and then we will eat and drink and celebrate as though this were the wedding feast it was always meant to be. Your brother can face you himself if he has any courage at all." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Which I doubt." Renna drew herself up, squaring her shoulders. She was still clutching the canvas sack in her free hand. Rowan gently took it from her and handed it to a passing servant. "Take this to the blue guest room. See that it is unpacked and the lady's belongings are properly arranged." The servant blinked, bobbed a curtsy, and fled with the sack. Renna watched her go, then looked back at Rowan. "Blue guest room. It has a view of the lake. I think you will like it. You are very certain of yourself." "No," he said honestly, "but I am certain of what is right." He pushed open the doors, and the noise of the crowd washed over them. The dining chamber was filled with guests, perhaps 50 or 60 in all. Minor nobility from the surrounding estates, merchants from the lakeshore towns, a handful of officers from the garrison. Garrett stood near the head table, resplendent in dark blue velvet, his fair hair gleaming in the candlelight. He saw Rowan and Renna and went rigid, the color draining from his face. Rowan ignored him. He led Renna straight to the high table, where the bride's seat had been left conspicuously empty, and pulled out the chair for her with deliberate courtesy. The room fell silent, every eye turning toward them. Renna hesitated, then sat. Rowan took the seat beside her, the one reserved for the groom. Garrett remained standing, frozen halfway between the table and the crowd. "Good evening," Rowan said, his voice carrying easily through the hushed chamber. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate this union between our families. May I present Renna Duskwater of the Duskwater clan, who has traveled far to be with us tonight." He paused, meeting Garrett's eyes across the room. "And who will be honored as she deserves." Garrett's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Vivienne appeared in the doorway behind him, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. But the guests were already murmuring, some in approval, others in confusion, and the momentum of the moment carried forward. Rowan signaled to the servants, and the first course was brought out. Roasted quail stuffed with herbs, arranged on a bed of greens. Tradition dictated that the groom serve the bride first, before any other guest received their plate. It was a gesture of respect and care, a symbol that the bride would always be provided for. Rowan took the serving fork and placed a quail on Renna's plate with his own hands. He added greens, a spoonful of the rich pan sauce, a slice of dark bread. When her plate was full, he set it before her and met her eyes. "For you," he said quietly. Renna stared down at the food, and for a moment he thought she might cry, but she blinked hard, lifted her chin, and picked up her fork. "Thank you." Only then did the servants move among the other guests, distributing plates. The hum of conversation resumed, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Garrett finally moved, stumbling to a seat farther down the table, his face ashen. Vivienne remained in the doorway, her hands clenched in her skirts. Rowan began to eat, his movements calm and unhurried. Beside him, Renna cut a small piece of quail and tasted it. He saw her close her eyes briefly, savoring it or perhaps steadying herself. "It is good," she said after a moment. "The cook is excellent." Rowan took a sip of wine. "You will eat well here." "Will I?" She looked at him sidelong. "You have made an enemy of your mother tonight, probably your brother as well. What happens tomorrow when the guests are gone and the reality sets in?" "Tomorrow we begin learning to know each other." He kept his tone light. "And the day after that, and the day after that. One day at a time. You are very calm. I am not calm." He smiled faintly. "I am simply good at appearing calm. Inside, I have no idea what I am doing." That startled a laugh out of her, short and sharp. Several guests glanced their way, and Rowan saw some of them smiling. Good. Let them see the bride laughing. Let them see her treated with kindness. Renna picked up her wine cup and took a long drink. When she set it down, her hand was steadier. "Why did you really do this, Rowan Reed? And do not tell me it was about honor. No one risks this much for honor alone." He considered the question as the servants brought the second course, a soup fragrant with leeks and cream. "My brother has spent his whole life preparing to inherit the estate," he said at last. "He has been groomed for it, educated for it, told that his wishes and his comfort are paramount because he is the heir. He has never had to consider what it means to give his word and keep it, because his word has never truly cost him anything. It has made him weak. And you, I have always been the spare." Rowan shrugged. "The younger son, the one who does not matter, it has given me a certain freedom. I can afford to care about things my brother cannot, like discarded orc brides, like people being treated shamefully by those who should know better." He glanced at her. "You are not a symbol or a political pawn, whatever my mother intended. You are a person who deserves to be treated with decency. That is reason enough." Renna was quiet for a moment, her spoon hovering over her soup. "I thought all humans saw orcs as monsters. Some do." He tasted his own soup. "I spent 5 years on the northern border fishing the cold lakes up there. I worked alongside orcs, traded with them, drank with them. They are no more monstrous than anyone else, less so than some. You were a soldier, a fisherman even then. But I was attached to the garrison as a provisioner," he smiled. "I am very good at catching fish." "Is that what you do now on the estate?" "Yes, we have a fishery on the lake, trout, pike, perch. I supply the estate and sell the surplus in the village." He nodded toward the windows where the last light of sunset gleamed on the water. "It is quiet work, I like it. Quiet." Renna tasted the soup, her expression thoughtful. "I do not think your life will be very quiet now." "Probably not." He met her eyes. "But some things are worth the noise." She held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away, something like color rising in her green cheeks. They finished the soup in companionable silence, and the third course arrived. Venison in a dark wine sauce, roasted root vegetables, soft white cheese. The wine flowed freely, and the guests grew louder, more relaxed. A few of them approached the high table to offer congratulations, speaking to Rowan and Renna both with varying degrees of sincerity. Renna handled them with cool politeness, her composure never slipping. Garrett did not approach. He sat hunched over his plate, drinking more than eating, his jaw tight. Vivienne had vanished entirely, likely to one of the private parlors to nurse her anger. Rowan felt a pang of something that might have been guilt, but he pushed it aside. His mother had created this situation. She could live with the consequences. As the meal drew to a close, musicians began to play, a lively tune that invited dancing. Several couples moved to the open space at the center of the room. Rowan stood and offered Renna his hand. "Will you dance with me?" She looked at his hand as though it were a trap. "I do not know your dances." "Then I will teach you. It is not complicated." When she still hesitated, he added, "They will expect it. The bride and groom always open the dancing." "I am not the bride," she said quietly. "Not yet, not truly. You are the woman who was promised to this family." He kept his hand extended. "And you are my guest. That is enough." She took a breath, then placed her hand in his and rose. He led her to the floor, acutely aware of every eye on them. The musicians shifted to a slower tune, a simple two-step that required only following the rhythm. "Place your other hand on my shoulder," Rowan said. "I will lead. Just follow my feet." Renna did as instructed, her movements stiff and uncertain. Rowan rested his free hand lightly on her waist and began to move, counting the steps under his breath so she could hear. She stumbled once, then caught the rhythm, her feet matching his. They turned slowly around the floor, and after a few measures she relaxed slightly, her grip on his shoulder easing. "There," he said. "You are doing well. You are a good teacher. I am a passable dancer," he smiled. "And you are a quick learner." "I had to be. In my clan you learn quickly or you are left behind." She glanced up at him. "Your brother would have hated me, would he not? Even if he had gone through with the marriage." "I do not know." Rowan guided her through a turn. "Garrett does not hate easily, he simply does not think about things beyond his own comfort. He would not have been cruel to you, I think, but he would not have been kind either. He would have been indifferent. Indifference is its own kind of cruelty." "Yes," he met her eyes. "I will not be indifferent, Renna, I promise you that." She searched his face, her expression unreadable. "You make many promises for a man who did not plan to marry today." "I did not plan it," he agreed, "but I do not regret it." The dance ended, and the other couples applauded politely. Rowan led Renna back to the table where the last course was being served. Honey cakes and preserved fruit, small cups of sweet cordial. They ate slowly, and Rowan saw the exhaustion beginning to creep into Renna's eyes. It had been a long day, and the weight of it was catching up to her. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I will escort you to your room, and the guests will understand that the bride is weary." He stood and offered his hand again. She took it, and together they made their way through the crowd toward the door. A few guests called out well wishes, and Rowan acknowledged them with nods and brief smiles. They climbed the stairs to the guest wing in silence. The blue room was at the end of the corridor, its door standing open. Inside, candles had been lit, and Renna's belongings had been unpacked and arranged on the dresser and wardrobe. The bed was turned down, the linens crisp and clean. A vase of wildflowers stood on the windowsill. Renna stepped inside and turned to face him. "This is a fine room." "I am glad you like it." Rowan hesitated in the doorway. "If you need anything, my room is just down the hall, third door on the left." "You are not," she stopped, color rising in her cheeks again. "We are not, no." He kept his voice gentle. "Not until you wish it. This marriage, if it happens, will happen at a pace you are comfortable with. I will not rush you." Renna let out a breath, relief flickering across her face. "Thank you. Sleep well, Renna." He stepped back into the corridor. "I will see you in the morning, Rowan." She caught his arm before he could turn away. "Thank you for tonight, for all of it." He covered her hand with his briefly. "You are welcome." He left her there and made his way back down the corridor, the sounds of the feast still drifting up from below. His mind was churning, turning over everything that had happened, everything that would need to happen next. Tomorrow he would have to face his father, explain his actions, deal with his mother's fury. But tonight he had done what was right. That would have to be enough. He was halfway to his own room when Garrett stepped out of the shadows, his face haggard in the candlelight. "Rowan, we need to talk." Rowan stopped, folding his arms across his chest. "All right, talk." Garrett ran a hand through his hair, his movements jerky. "What you did tonight. What I did was honor a contract that you were too cowardly to honor yourself. It was not cowardice." Garrett's voice rose, then dropped again. "I did not want to marry her. I never wanted to marry her. Mother arranged it without consulting me, and I agreed because I thought I had to. But I cannot do it, Rowan. I cannot spend my life bound to a woman I do not love, who is not even human." "Then you should have said so 3 months ago, before the contracts were signed." Rowan kept his tone even, though anger simmered beneath it. "You should have refused from the beginning and let the negotiations end there. What you should not have done is let her come all this way, prepare for a wedding, and then try to cast her out in secret like some shameful mistake." "I know." Garrett's shoulders sagged. "I know it was wrong, but I did not know how to stop it. Mother was so certain it was the right match, and Father agreed, and I let it happen because it was easier than fighting them. And so Renna paid the price for your weakness. Garrett flinched. I am sorry. Truly. But what you did tonight, taking her as your own bride, Rowan, you do not have to do this. We can find another solution. Mother is already drafting letters to the Duskwater clan, offering compensation. I am not interested in compensation. Rowan's voice hardened. Renna stays. I will marry her if she agrees. That is the end of it. But why? Garrett stared at him, bewildered. You do not know her. You have no obligation to her. Why would you bind yourself to a woman you met for the first time tonight? Because someone needed to do the right thing, Rowan said. And you were not going to. Garrett opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked older suddenly, worn and defeated. Mother is furious. I imagine she is. Father will be as well when he returns. Let him be. Rowan stepped past his brother, heading for his own room. I can live with their anger. I could not live with what you were about to do. He left Garrett standing in the corridor and went into his room, closing the door firmly behind him. The bed was inviting, but he did not feel like sleeping. Instead, he crossed to the window and looked out over the lake, its surface black and glittering under the stars. Somewhere in the house, Renna was settling into the blue room, trying to make sense of a day that had turned her life upside down. He hoped he had made the right choice. He hoped she would not come to regret it. But for now, all he could do was move forward, one day at a time, and see where the path led. Morning came cold and bright, the sun rising over the lake in shades of gold and rose. Rowan woke early, as he always did, and dressed in his usual clothes, sturdy trousers, a linen shirt, a leather vest. He splashed water on his face from the basin, ran a comb through his hair, and headed downstairs to the kitchen. The servants were already at work, clearing away the remnants of the feast. They glanced at him nervously as he entered, but he ignored their stares and helped himself to bread and cheese from the pantry. He was eating at the kitchen table when his father arrived, boots muddy from the road, his face like a thunderstorm. Rowan, my study. Now. Rowan finished his bread, wiped his hands on a cloth, and followed his father out of the kitchen and down the hall to the book-lined study. Richard Reed closed the door behind them with a sharp click and turned to face his son, arms folded across his broad chest. Your mother has informed me of last night's events, Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. She tells me you publicly humiliated your brother, defied her authority, and claimed his intended bride for yourself. Is this accurate? That is one interpretation. Rowan leaned against the desk. Mine would be that Garrett and Mother were attempting to cast aside a contracted bride in secret, and I intervened to prevent a dishonorable act. Richard's jaw tightened. The arrangement was made for Garrett. He is the heir. You had no right to interfere. Garrett did not want her. He made that abundantly clear. The contract names the Reed family, not Garrett specifically. I saw an opportunity to honor the agreement and took it. An opportunity. His father's voice was flat. You saw an orc woman being sent away and decided on a whim to marry her yourself. Not on a whim. Rowan met his father's gaze steadily. I made a deliberate choice, based on what I believed was right. The Duskwater clan entered into this agreement in good faith. To betray that faith would have damaged our reputation and risked future alliances. I preserved the contract and our honor. You should be thanking me, not berating me. Thanking you. Richard let out a harsh laugh. Rowan, you have bound yourself to a woman you do not know from a clan we have minimal ties with for the sake of an abstract principle. That is not honor. That is foolishness. Perhaps. Rowan straightened. But it is done. Renna is here, and I will marry her if she is willing. If you wish to dissolve the contract and send her away with compensation, you may try. but I will not help you." His father stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. "You are as stubborn as your mother, boy, though you would hate to hear it. I am nothing like mother. You are more like her than you think." Richard moved to the window, looking out over the estate. "She was furious last night. She ranted for an hour about your insolence, your disrespect, your determination to ruin Garrett's future. But beneath the anger, I think she was impressed. You stood up to her. Not many people do that. I did not do it to impress her. I know." His father turned back to him. "But the fact remains that you have created a complicated situation. Garrett is humiliated. Your mother is enraged. And you are now responsible for a woman who has no allies here except you. I am aware." "Are you?" Richard's gaze sharpened. "Renna Duskwater is a long way from her clan. She has no family here, no friends. If you fail her, she has no one to turn to. That is a heavy burden, Rowan. I will not fail her. You say that now." His father's voice softened slightly. "But marriage is harder than you think, especially a marriage born of obligation rather than affection. You will need patience and compromise and a great deal of luck. Then I will find them." Rowan pushed away from the desk. "If that is all, father, I should go see to the fishery. The nets need checking." Richard waved a hand. "Go, but Rowan, think carefully about what you are committing to. And speak to Renna. Make sure she understands what this means. For both of you." Rowan nodded and left the study, his mind already turning toward the day's work. He stopped by the kitchen to grab a few apples, then headed down to the docks. The morning air was cool and damp, and mist still clung to the surface of the lake. He breathed deeply, letting the familiar scents calm his churning thoughts. He was halfway through checking the first net when he heard footsteps on the dock behind him. He turned and saw Renna, dressed in simpler clothes than the night before, a plain green tunic and dark trousers, her black hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger without the formal dress and tired, but her eyes were alert. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." She stopped a few paces away, her hands clasped in front of her. "I woke early. I did not want to stay in that room any longer. I understand." He set down the net and straightened. "How did you sleep?" "Badly." She glanced at the lake, then back at him. "I have been thinking about what happens next. And I do not know if I want to marry you, Rowan Reed." Her voice was blunt, almost harsh. "You were kind to me last night. You saved me from humiliation. I am grateful for that. But gratitude is not a foundation for marriage. No." He gestured to a crate at the end of the dock. "Sit, let us talk." She hesitated, then sat, her posture stiff. Rowan sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "You are right," he said. "Gratitude is not enough, but neither of us entered into this expecting love. The original arrangement was political, a joining of families for mutual benefit. That has not changed. If you marry me instead of Garrett, it still fulfills the contract. You still gain the security and status your clan negotiated for." "And what do you gain?" She looked at him directly. "Be honest." He considered the question, turning it over in his mind. "Peace of mind," he said at last. "Knowing that I did not stand by and let an injustice happen. And companionship, perhaps. I have been alone a long time. I would not mind sharing my life with someone if she is willing." "Companionship." Renna's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You have very modest expectations." "I have realistic expectations." He picked up a small stone from the dock and tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "I am not a romantic, Renna. I will not promise you passion or grand gestures, but I can promise you respect and honesty and a life that is not unkind. That is what I have to offer." She was silent for a long moment, her gaze on the lake. "In my clan, marriages are usually arranged by the elders. The couple meets a few times before the wedding, learns each other's names and families. Then they are bound and they make the best of it. Some grow to love each other, some do not, but they endure because that is what is expected. And what were your expectations when you came here? Duty. Her voice was flat. I expected to do my duty to my clan, to marry a man I did not know for the sake of an alliance. I did not expect kindness or friendship or anything resembling happiness. I expected to endure. Then let me offer you something more than endurance. Rowan turned to face her. I will not force you to marry me, Renna. If you want to leave, I will make sure you have safe passage home and enough coin to compensate for the insult you were dealt. But if you stay, I will treat you as my partner, not my possession. We will learn each other. We will build something together on our own terms. Renna's eyes glistened and she blinked hard, her jaw set. Why do you care so much? You do not even know me. I know enough. He held her gaze. I know you are brave enough to travel alone into a foreign land. I know you are strong enough to stand tall when you are being cast aside. I know you deserve better than what my family tried to do to you. That is enough to start with. She let out a shaky breath and looked away. You are very strange, Rowan Reed. So I have been told. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. He stood and offered her his hand. Come, let me show you the fishery. It is not much, but it is mine. She took his hand and rose, and he led her down the dock toward the cluster of buildings at the water's edge. There was a smokehouse, a storage shed, and a small cottage where he kept his tools and records. He showed her the nets, the traps, the drying racks. He explained the rhythms of the work, the different species of fish, the patterns of the seasons. She listened intently, asking occasional questions, her earlier tension gradually easing. They spent the morning together, talking little but working side by side. Rowan checked the nets while Renna watched, and when he began to mend a torn section, she asked if she could try. He handed her the needle and twine, and she fumbled with it at first, then caught the rhythm. Her stitches were clumsy but serviceable, and he praised her effort. You learn quickly, he said. I told you. In my clan, you learn quickly or you are left behind. She tied off the twine and handed the needle back to him. What else do you do here? Besides mending nets? Bait the traps, check the lines, clean and salt the catch. In the spring, we harvest the roe. In the fall, we smoke the surplus to sell at the winter markets. He gestured toward the cottage. It is quiet work, as I said, repetitive, but I find it peaceful. And you do this alone, mostly. I have 2 lads from the village who help during the busy seasons, but most of the time it is just me. He paused. And you now, if you wish. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. You would teach me, if you are willing to learn. I have never fished. In my clan, we hunted in the forests, deer, boar, sometimes bear. I can track and skin and butcher, but fish are foreign to me. Then it will be an adventure for both of us, he smiled. Teaching you to fish. Learning to hunt from you. A fair exchange. Renna's lips curved in the first genuine smile he had seen from her. Perhaps. They returned to the main house for the midday meal, and Rowan was relieved to find that his mother had taken her meal in her private parlor, sparing them an awkward confrontation. Garrett was absent as well, likely nursing his wounded pride in the village tavern. Rowan and Renna ate in the kitchen with the servants, who eyed them curiously but said little. Afterward, Renna retreated to her room to rest, and Rowan returned to the docks. The afternoon passed in steady work, and by the time the sun began to dip toward the western hills, he had sorted and cleaned the day's catch and delivered the best of it to the kitchen. He was washing his hands at the pump when Renna appeared again, her hair braided and her expression determined. I have made my decision, she said without preamble. Rowan straightened, water dripping from his hands. And I will marry you. Her voice was steady. "Not because I have no other choice, but because I believe you are a man who keeps his word. You offered me respect and honesty. That is more than I expected, and it is enough." Relief flooded through him, unexpected and sharp. He had not realized how much he had wanted her to stay until she said the words. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet." She stepped closer. "I have conditions." "Name them." "I will not be a decoration or a symbol. If I am to be your wife, I want work, something useful, something that matters." "Done." He nodded. "The fishery can always use another pair of hands, and if that does not suit you, we will find something else. Second, I want to visit my clan at least once a year. I will not be cut off from my family." "Agreed." He had expected that. "We will make the journey together if you like." "Third," she hesitated, her gaze dropping. "Third, I want you to promise that if you change your mind, if you come to regret this, you will tell me. I will not be kept in the dark and discarded again." "I promise." He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "But I will not change my mind, Renna. I may not be a romantic, but I am loyal. When I commit to something, I see it through." She looked down at their joined hands, her expression unreadable. "Then we have an agreement. We have an agreement." He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "When would you like to marry?" "We can have the banns read in the village, make it official as soon as possible." Her jaw tightened. "I want this settled. I want it done so that no one can take it away." "Then we will speak to the magistrate tomorrow." He hesitated. "There is one thing, though." The marriage contract was drawn up for Garrett. "We will need to have it amended to name me instead. That will require your consent and the consent of your clan elders." Renna frowned. "How long will that take?" "A few weeks, at least. Maybe longer, depending on how quickly the messengers can travel." He saw the worry flicker across her face and added, "But we can have a betrothal ceremony now if you like. Something formal witnessed that binds us to each other until the legal details are settled." "Yes." She let out a breath. "Yes, I want that. Then I will arrange it." He glanced at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Come, let us go tell my father." Richard Reed took the news with resigned acceptance, though Vivienne, when she finally deigned to join them in the study, was icily furious. "You cannot be serious," she said, her voice clipped. "Rowan, you have had 1 day to reconsider this madness. 1 day. And you are still determined to throw your life away." "I am determined to honor a commitment." Rowan kept his tone level. "Renna and I will be betrothed formally tomorrow. When the contract is amended, we will marry. That is final. You are a fool." Vivienne's eyes blazed. "And you," she turned to Renna. "You have ensnared my son with some orc trickery, mother. That is enough." Richard's voice cracked like a whip. "Renna has done nothing wrong. If you are angry, be angry at me for agreeing to the original contract or at Garrett for his cowardice. But leave the girl alone." Vivienne's mouth snapped shut, her face flushing. She glared at them all in turn, then spun on her heel and stalked out of the study, slamming the door behind her. Richard sighed. "She will come around, eventually." "Will she?" Rowan doubted it, but he kept the thought to himself. "Give her time." His father looked at Renna. "You have my blessing for what it is worth. I do not know if this will be a happy marriage, but I believe my son will do his best by you." Renna inclined her head. "That is all I ask." The betrothal ceremony was held the following afternoon in the village chapel, a small stone building that smelled of candle wax and old wood. The magistrate presided, reading the formal words while Rowan and Renna stood before him, hands clasped. A handful of witnesses attended: Richard, Simon, a few of the estate's senior servants, and the village priest. Vivienne and Garrett were conspicuously absent. Rowan spoke his vows clearly, promising to care for Renna, to provide for her, to treat her with honor and respect. Renna's voice was quieter, but no less steady, as she made the same promises in return. When the magistrate declared them formally betrothed, Rowan slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, a placeholder until the wedding proper. Renna stared down at the ring, turning it slowly on her finger. "It is lovely. It belonged to my grandmother." He had found it in his father's study that morning, tucked into a drawer with other family keepsakes. "She was a fisher's daughter, like you will be a fisher's wife. I thought it fitting." Renna's eyes glistened, but she blinked hard and nodded. "Thank you." They walked back to the estate together, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. The path took them along the edge of the lake, and Rowan found himself pointing out landmarks. The inlet where the trout spawned in spring, the rocky point where the pike liked to lurk, the shallow cove where the village children swam in summer. "You love this place," Renna said. "I do." He glanced at her. "Do you think you could love it too?" "I do not know yet." She looked out over the water, her expression distant. "But I am willing to try." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Rowan spent his days on the lake and at the nets, and Renna began to join him, learning the work with the same focused determination she seemed to bring to everything. She was clumsy at first, unfamiliar with the tools and techniques, but she improved quickly. Within a week, she could bait a trap as efficiently as he could. Within 2, she could raid the water well enough to predict where the fish would be. They worked mostly in silence, but it was a companionable silence, broken occasionally by questions or observations. Rowan found himself enjoying her presence, the quiet steadiness of her, the way she approached each task with careful attention. She did not chatter or fuss. She simply worked, and that suited him. In the evenings, they ate together in the kitchen or walked along the shore, talking about small things. The weather, the day's catch, the gossip from the village. Slowly, Rowan began to learn more about her. She had grown up in the northern forests, the youngest of 4 siblings. Her father was a hunter, her mother a tanner. She had been promised to the Reed family because her clan needed allies, and she had accepted the duty without complaint, as she had been raised to do. "Did you want to come here?" he asked one evening as they sat on the dock, watching the sun set. Renna shrugged. "It does not matter what I wanted, it was what was needed. It matters to me." She looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "No, I did not want to come. I wanted to stay with my family in the forests I knew, but that was not an option. And now, she hesitated. "Now I am glad I came. Not for the reasons I expected, but I am glad. Because of the fishing," he smiled slightly, "because of you." She said it simply, without artifice, and Rowan felt something shift in his chest. "I am glad too," he said quietly. They sat together as the light faded, the lake turning dark and still, and Rowan thought that perhaps this strange, improvised marriage might work after all. But the peace did not last. A week later, a messenger arrived from the Duskwater clan, bearing a letter for Renna. She read it in the privacy of the blue room, and when she emerged, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "What is it?" Rowan asked, alarmed. "My clan elders. They have heard about what happened, the broken betrothal, the way I was treated. They are furious." She thrust the letter at him. "They are demanding compensation from your family. Gold, livestock, trade rights, and they want assurances that I am being treated honorably." Rowan read the letter quickly, his jaw tightening. The demands were steep enough to strain the estate's finances. And the tone was harsh, bordering on hostile. If the Reeds did not comply, the letter warned, the Duskwater clan would consider the alliance broken and act accordingly. "This is a disaster," Renna said, her voice shaking. "If your family refuses, my clan will see it as an insult. There could be raids, violence, and if your family agrees, they will resent me even more than they already do." "They will agree," Rowan said firmly, "because they have to. My mother's actions created this mess. She can pay to clean it up." but no. He set the letter down and took her hands, holding them tightly. Renna, this is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. My family wronged you, and now they will make it right. I will see to it. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You cannot fight your whole family for me, Rowan. It is too much. It is not too much. He lifted one hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. You are my betrothed. You will be my wife. Your honor is my honor. I will not let anyone, not even my family, treat you shamefully. A tear slipped down her cheek and he wiped it away with his thumb. She let out a shaky laugh. You are impossibly stubborn. Yes, he smiled. But you already knew that. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. They stood that way for a long moment, and Rowan felt the tension slowly drain out of her. Thank you, she whispered. Always. The next morning, Rowan took the letter to his father. Richard read it with a grim expression, then passed it to Vivienne, who had been summoned to the study. Her face went white as she read, then red with anger. This is extortion, she said sharply. They are using the situation to squeeze concessions out of us. This is the consequence of your actions, Rowan interrupted. You tried to cast aside a contracted bride in secret. The Duskwater clan is within their rights to demand compensation. We were going to offer compensation, not enough, clearly. Richard set the letter on the desk. These demands are harsh but not unreasonable. We will meet them. Richard, we will meet them, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. We made a commitment. We broke it or tried to. Now we pay the price. He looked at Rowan. Draft a response. Agree to the demands in full. And arrange for the amended contract to be delivered to the Duskwater clan as soon as it is ready. I want this matter settled. Vivienne opened her mouth, then closed it again, her lips pressed into a thin line. She turned and left the study without another word, her spine rigid with fury. Richard sighed. Your mother is going to make your life difficult, boy. She already has, Rowan said dryly. Then a little more will not hurt. His father managed a faint smile. Go on. Tell Renna the matter is resolved. She deserves to know she is safe here. Rowan found Renna in the smokehouse, checking the fish that had been hung to cure. She looked up when he entered, her expression anxious. It is settled, he said. My father has agreed to the demands. The Duskwater clan will receive everything they asked for. Renna let out a breath, her shoulders sagging with relief. Truly, truly. He crossed to her and took her hands. You are safe, Renna, you are wanted, and this family will honor its commitments no matter what it costs. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You have given me so much, Rowan. I do not know how to repay you. You do not need to repay me. He squeezed her hands gently. Just stay, that is enough, she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. I will stay. The amended contract arrived from the Duskwater clan 2 weeks later, signed and sealed by the elders. The wedding was scheduled for the first day of autumn, when the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp. It would be a smaller ceremony than the original feast, held at the estate chapel with only close family and friends in attendance. Renna seemed relieved by the simplicity of it. I do not need a grand celebration, she said as they walked along the shore one evening. I just want it to be real. I want it to be ours. It will be, Rowan promised. As the days passed, he found himself growing more and more fond of her. She was quiet but not timid, strong-willed but not stubborn. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and a quick mind that he appreciated. She was also, he realized, falling for him. It showed in small ways. The way her eyes lit up when he appeared, the way she leaned into him when they sat together, the way she laughed at his jokes even when they were not particularly funny. She did not say it aloud, but he could see it in every gesture, every glance, and he was falling for her too. He had not expected it, had not planned for it, but it was happening all the same. He found himself thinking of her when they were apart, looking forward to the moments they spent together. He noticed the small details about her. The way her tusks caught the light when she smiled, the way her hair fell over her shoulder when she bent to work, the way her voice softened when she spoke his name. One evening, as they sat on the dock watching the stars emerge, Renna turned to him and said, "Rowan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you—" She hesitated, then started again. "Do you think you could ever love me? Truly, I mean. Not just as a partner or a companion, but as someone you want, someone you cannot imagine living without." He looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. "I think I already do," he said quietly. She stared at him. "What?" "I think I already love you." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I did not mean to. I did not plan for it. But somewhere along the way it happened. You are Renna. You are extraordinary. You are strong and brave and kind, and I cannot imagine my life without you now." Her breath hitched and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it. I thought you might not feel the same." "I do." He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently. "I do, Renna." She leaned forward and kissed him, tentative at first, then with more confidence. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her back, pouring all his unspoken feelings into it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "I did not expect this," Renna said, laughing shakily. "When I came here, I thought I would be enduring a loveless marriage, doing my duty. I never imagined I would find this. Neither did I." Rowan brushed a tear from her cheek. "But I am glad we did." They sat together under the stars, holding each other, and Rowan felt a deep, quiet contentment settle over him. This was not the life he had planned, but it was the life he wanted now, and he would do everything in his power to make it a good one. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze that smelled of falling leaves. Renna wore a dress of deep green, embroidered with silver thread, that one of the village seamstresses had made for her. Her hair was braided with white ribbons, and she carried a bouquet of late summer wildflowers. Rowan wore his best clothes, simple but well made, and tried not to fidget as they stood before the priest in the chapel. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. Rowan spoke his vows with a steady voice, promising to love and cherish Renna for the rest of his days. Renna's voice shook slightly as she spoke hers, but her gaze never wavered from his. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Rowan kissed her gently, and the small crowd of witnesses applauded. Richard clapped him on the shoulder afterward, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Well done, son. I am proud of you." Even Vivienne, standing stiffly at the back of the chapel, managed a grudging nod. Garrett was absent, having left the estate weeks ago to stay with friends in the capital. Rowan did not miss him. After the ceremony, there was a modest feast in the estate's dining hall. The food was simple but delicious, and the wine flowed freely. Rowan and Renna sat together at the head table, their hands clasped under the table, and for the first time since this whole affair began, Rowan felt truly at peace. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift away, Rowan leaned close to Renna and murmured, "Are you ready to go home?" She looked at him, puzzled. "We are home." "Not quite." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come with me." He led her out of the hall and down to the docks, where a small rowboat was tied, its oars resting in the locks. In the boat were their belongings, packed into 2 canvas sacks along with blankets and provisions. "What is this?" Renna asked. "This," Rowan said, "is our new beginning." He gestured to the far side of the lake, where a small cottage stood on a wooded point. "That cottage was my grandfather's. It has been empty for years, but I have been fixing it up over the past few weeks. It is ours now if you want it. A place that is just ours, away from the estate and all its complications. Renna stared at the cottage, then at him. You did this for us, for us. He climbed into the boat and held out his hand. What do you say, wife? Shall we start our life together? She took his hand and stepped into the boat, settling onto the bench beside him. Yes, let us go home. Rowan untied the boat and began to row, the oars cutting smoothly through the dark water. The moon was rising, casting a silver path across the lake. Renna leaned against his shoulder, her hand resting on his knee, and he felt a surge of love so strong it took his breath away. They reached the cottage as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. Rowan tied the boat to the small dock and helped Renna out, then carried their belongings up the path to the cottage door. He pushed it open and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the cottage was simple but comfortable. There was a main room with a hearth and a table, a small bedroom with a sturdy bed, and a kitchen nook with shelves and a stove. Rowan had cleaned and aired it out, brought in firewood and linens, stocked the shelves with food. It was not grand, but it was theirs. Renna walked through the room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the window frames. When she turned back to him, her eyes were bright with tears. It is perfect, she said. It is ours, Rowan corrected. He crossed to her and took her hands. We will build our life here, Renna. Just the two of us. We will fish and hunt and grow old together, and no one will tell us how to live or who to be. This is our place. She kissed him, fierce and desperate, and he held her close, his heart full to bursting. They stood together in the center of their new home as the sun rose over the lake, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Rowan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The days that followed were some of the happiest of Rowan's life. He and Renna fell into an easy rhythm, dividing the work of the cottage and the fishery between them. She learned to cook the fish he caught, and he learned to prepare the game she hunted. They spent their mornings on the water and their afternoons working on the cottage, repairing the roof, mending the fences, planting a small garden. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking or reading or simply enjoying each other's company. Renna told him stories of her clan, of the forests and mountains where she had grown up, and Rowan shared his own memories of the lake and the estate. They laughed together, argued occasionally, and made love with a tenderness that surprised them both. One evening, as they lay together in their bed, Renna traced a finger along his jaw and said, "Do you ever regret it, choosing me instead of staying out of it?" "Never." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Renna. I mean that. Even though I am an orc, even though I am not what you planned for, especially because you are an orc." He pulled her close, resting his chin on the top of her head. "You are brave and strong and kind. You challenge me. You make me want to be better. I could not ask for more." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I love you, Rowan Reed." "I love you too, Renna Reed." He smiled at the sound of it. "Renna Reed, I like that." She laughed, the sound muffled against his chest. "So do I." As autumn deepened and the leaves turned brilliant shades of red and gold, Renna began to teach Rowan to hunt. They ventured into the forests together, moving quietly through the underbrush, tracking deer and boar. Rowan was clumsy at first, used to the stillness of fishing rather than the active pursuit of hunting, but Renna was a patient teacher. She showed him how to read tracks, how to move without sound, how to wait for the perfect shot. "You are improving," she said one afternoon as they crouched behind a fallen log, watching a deer graze in a clearing. "A few more weeks and you will be passable." "Passable," he grinned. "High praise indeed. Do not let it go to your head." She knocked an arrow and drew the bow, her movements smooth and practiced. The arrow flew true and the deer dropped without a sound. Renna lowered the bow and turned to him, her eyes alight with satisfaction. "That is how it is done." "Show off," he said, but he was smiling. They dressed the deer together and carried it back to the cottage, where they hung it to age. That evening they cooked the liver over the fire, seasoned with herbs from the garden, and ate it with fresh bread and cheese. It was a simple meal, but it tasted like victory. As winter approached, they made preparations, stocking the cottage with firewood, salting and smoking fish and meat, mending their clothes and blankets. Renna proved to be resourceful and practical, and Rowan found himself relying on her more and more. She was his partner in every sense of the word, and he could not imagine facing the cold months ahead without her. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Renna said, "I received a letter from my mother today." Rowan looked up from the net he was mending. "What did she say?" "She is pleased that I am happy. She says the elders are satisfied with the compensation your family provided, and they consider the alliance restored." Renna smiled faintly. "She also says she wants to meet you, to see for herself the man who chose me." "Then we will visit in the spring," Rowan said. "When the weather clears and the roads are passable, I would like to meet your family." "You would?" She looked surprised. "Of course." He set down the net and moved to sit beside her. "You are my wife. Your family is my family now. I want to know them, to show them that you are loved and cared for." Renna leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You are too good to me. Impossible." He kissed the top of her head. "I am exactly as good to you as you deserve." Winter came, bringing snow and ice and long, dark nights. The lake froze over and the fishing slowed to a trickle. Rowan and Renna spent their days indoors, working on small projects and keeping the fire burning. It was a quiet, cozy time, and Rowan found he did not mind the enforced stillness. He had Renna, and that was enough. One night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, Renna said, "Rowan, I need to tell you something." Her tone made him sit up, alarmed. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine." She smiled a little nervously. "More than fine, actually. I am Rowan. I am pregnant." For a moment he could only stare at her, the words not quite registering. Then the meaning hit him and he laughed, a joyous sound that filled the small room. "Pregnant. You are pregnant. We are going to have a baby." "Yes." She was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "I was not sure how you would feel. I know we have only been married a few months, and we did not plan for this. I am thrilled." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Renna, this is wonderful. You are wonderful. Thank you." She clung to him, her body shaking with laughter and tears. "I was so worried you would be upset." "Upset? Why would I be upset?" He pulled back to look at her. "You are carrying our child. That is a gift, Renna, a blessing." She kissed him, and he kissed her back, and they held each other late into the night, whispering plans and dreams for the future. The rest of the winter passed in a blur of preparation. Rowan began building a cradle, carving it from a single piece of oak and sanding it smooth. Renna sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her stitches careful and precise. They talked endlessly about names and nursery arrangements and what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our child to grow up knowing they are loved," Renna said one evening as she folded a small shirt. "Not just tolerated or endured, but truly loved." "They will be," Rowan promised. "We will make sure of it." Spring arrived slowly, the ice on the lake breaking up in great cracking sheets, the snow melting to reveal the brown earth beneath. Rowan returned to the fishery with renewed energy, eager to provide for his growing family. Renna's belly began to swell, and she moved with a careful grace that made his heart ache. One morning, as they were working on the dock, a boat appeared on the lake, heading toward them. Rowan shaded his eyes and saw his father at the oars, Richard's face weathered but kind. "Father," Rowan called as the boat drew near. "What brings you here?" Richard tied the boat to the dock and climbed out, his movements a little stiff. "I wanted to see how you both were faring. And to bring news." "What news?" Rowan helped him onto the dock, and the three of them walked up to the cottage. Inside, over tea and bread, Richard said, "Your mother has decided to retire to her sister's estate in the south. She will leave at the end of the month." Rowan blinked, surprised. "Why?" "She says the estate holds too many unhappy memories for her now. Garrett's departure, your marriage, she feels she has lost control of everything she built." Richard sighed. "I tried to convince her to stay, but her mind is made up." "And you?" Renna asked quietly. "How do you feel about it?" "Relieved, honestly." Richard managed a wry smile. "Your mother is a formidable woman, but she can be exhausting. I think the estate will be more peaceful without her." "What about Garrett?" Rowan asked, still in the capital. "He has taken a position with the magistrate's office, clerking for one of the judges. He seems content enough." Richard glanced at Rowan. "He sent a letter asking me to convey his apologies to you both for the way he handled things." "Better late than never, I suppose," Rowan said dryly. Richard chuckled. "Indeed." He looked at Renna, his gaze dropping to her rounded belly. "And I see congratulations are in order." Renna smiled, her hand resting on her stomach. "Yes, the baby will come in late summer." "That is wonderful news." Richard's expression softened. "I am happy for you both, truly." They spent the rest of the morning together, talking and catching up. When Richard finally took his leave, rowing back across the lake, Rowan felt a quiet sense of closure. The estate, with all its complications and tensions, was no longer his concern. His life was here now, with Renna and their child. As the months passed and Renna's belly grew larger, Rowan found himself marveling at the changes in her. She glowed with health and happiness, her skin radiant, her eyes bright. She moved more slowly but with a quiet confidence that took his breath away. One evening in late summer, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Renna gasped and clutched her stomach. "Rowan, I think it is time." He was on his feet in an instant, his heart pounding. "Now, are you sure?" "Yes." Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "The pains started this morning, but they were mild. Now they are getting stronger." He helped her inside and settled her on the bed, then ran to fetch the village midwife, a capable woman named Marta who had delivered half the babies in the area. Marta arrived quickly, her bag of supplies in hand, and took charge with brisk efficiency. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the next morning. Rowan stayed by Renna's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. She bore it with a quiet strength that awed him, her face set with determination. Finally, as the sun rose over the lake, the baby arrived. A tiny, squalling girl with green skin and a wisp of dark hair. Marta cleaned her and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her in Renna's arms. Renna stared down at their daughter, tears streaming down her face. "She is perfect." Rowan leaned over them both, his throat tight with emotion. "She is just like her mother." Renna laughed, exhausted and joyful. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names endlessly, but now, looking at their daughter's tiny, scrunched face, only one felt right. "Zara," Rowan said. "Zara Reed. Zara." Renna whispered the name, and the baby quieted, her dark eyes blinking up at them. "Yes, Zara." Marta left after ensuring that both mother and baby were healthy, and Rowan spent the rest of the day simply sitting with his new family, marveling at the tiny life they had created. Zara was small and fragile, her fingers like little twigs, her cries surprisingly loud for such a tiny body. But she was theirs, and Rowan felt a fierce protectiveness settle over him. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Renna recovered slowly, her strength returning day by day. Rowan took over most of the household chores, fetching water and cooking meals and tending to the garden, while Renna focused on nursing Zara and regaining her strength. One evening, as Rowan rocked Zara to sleep in the cradle he had made, Renna said, "You are a good father, Rowan." He looked up surprised. "I am only doing what needs to be done." "No," she shook her head. "You are doing more than that. You are patient and gentle and kind. Zara is lucky to have you. We are all lucky," he said quietly, "to have each other." Renna smiled, and in that moment, Rowan felt a deep, abiding contentment. This was his life now. A small cottage by the lake, a wife he loved, a daughter he would protect with everything he had. It was not the life he had planned, but it was the life he had chosen, and it was perfect. As autumn returned and the leaves began to turn once more, Rowan and Renna settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around Zara's needs and the demands of the fishery. They worked together as they always had, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and the endless small tasks of parenthood. One afternoon, as Rowan was mending a net on the dock and Renna was nursing Zara in the cottage, he heard the sound of oars cutting through water. He looked up and saw a boat approaching, and his heart lifted when he recognized the occupants. Renna's mother, a sturdy orc woman with gray streaked hair, and her father, a grizzled hunter with kind eyes. Rowan hurried to the dock to greet them, helping them tie off the boat and guiding them up to the cottage. Renna's face lit up when she saw her parents, and she handed Zara to Rowan so she could embrace them. "Mother, father," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I am so glad you are here." Her mother cupped Renna's face in her hands, studying her intently. "You look well, daughter. Happy?" "I am." Renna glanced at Rowan. "Very happy." Her father turned to Rowan, his gaze assessing. "So you are the human who chose my daughter?" "I am." Rowan met his gaze steadily. "Rowan Reed." "I am Thrain Duskwater. This is my wife, Kara." He extended a hand and Rowan shook it firmly. "My daughter's letters spoke highly of you. I wanted to see for myself if you deserved such praise." "I hope I do," Rowan said simply. Thrain studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you might." They spent the next few days together, sharing meals and stories and getting to know each other. Kara doted on Zara, holding her granddaughter with a tenderness that brought tears to Renna's eyes. Thrain and Rowan went hunting together, and Rowan found the older orc to be a skilled and patient teacher. By the time Renna's parents left, Rowan felt as though he had gained not just in laws but friends. "They like you," Renna said as they waved goodbye from the dock. "I like them too." Rowan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You come from good people, Renna. So do you." She leaned into him, Zara cradled in her arms. "We are very lucky, you know. I know." He kissed the top of her head, "And I will never take it for granted." The years that followed were full of quiet joy. Zara grew from a tiny infant into a lively, curious child, with her mother's green skin and her father's hazel eyes. She loved the lake, spending hours splashing in the shallows and watching Rowan work the nets. Renna taught her to track and hunt, and Rowan taught her to fish, and together they raised her to be strong and kind and unafraid. When Zara was 3, Renna became pregnant again, and the following spring they welcomed a son whom they named Eric. He was quieter than his sister, more thoughtful, but he had the same fierce determination. The cottage grew more crowded and more chaotic, but Rowan would not have traded it for anything. Richard visited often, bringing gifts for the children and news from the estate. Vivienne never returned from the south, and Garrett remained in the capital, eventually marrying a merchant's daughter and starting a family of his own. Rowan exchanged occasional letters with his brother, cordial but distant. The wounds of the past had scarred over, but they had not entirely healed. One evening, when Zara was 6 and Eric was 3, the family sat together on the dock, watching the sun set over the lake. Zara was chattering about a fish she had seen, and Eric was dozing against Renna's shoulder. Rowan sat with his arm around his wife, feeling the warmth of the fading sun on his face. "Rowan," Renna said quietly, "do you ever think about that first night, when you stopped my mother and uncle from sending me away, sometimes?" He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because I think about it all the time," she smiled. "I think about how terrified I was and how angry and how certain I was that my life was over. And then you stepped in and everything changed. I just did what was right. You did more than that." She turned to face him fully. "You gave me a home, a family, a life I never imagined I could have. You gave me everything, Rowan." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "You gave me everything too, Renna. You gave me a reason to be better, to be more than just a second son who mattered to no one. You made me whole." She kissed him, gentle and lingering, and the children giggled. Rowan pulled back, smiling, and ruffled Zara's hair. "Come on, you two," he said. "Time to head inside. It is getting dark." They gathered their things and walked back to the cottage together, a small, happy family, and Rowan felt a deep, abiding gratitude for the strange, unexpected path that had brought them here. He had not chosen this life, not at first, but he had chosen Renna. And in choosing her, he had found everything he did not know he needed. The cottage glowed with lamplight as they entered, and Renna set about putting the children to bed while Rowan banked the fire. When the house was quiet, they sat together by the hearth, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I love you," Renna murmured. "I love you too," Rowan replied. "Always." Outside, the lake lay dark and still, the stars reflected on its surface like scattered diamonds. The world was vast and full of uncertainty, but here, in this small cottage by the water, Rowan Reed had found peace. He had found love. He had found home. And that was more than he had ever dared to dream.